Hello subscribers. I just figured I'd do a little live stream of coding on Fortaeverse since I was doing the coding anyway.
Hello, subscribers.
And don't know if anybody will be interested or not, but hey, maybe someone will want to come online and chat for a bit. So I'm currently working on items and randomly generating items based on all kinds of different things. And so I'll try to explain a little bit of what I'm doing. So, I've been playing Might and Magic 4 a little bit lately, and I really like how they have random properties on magic items like, Creo Sword, Cold Sword, Ice Sword, and then you have Flame Sword and all these different properties like that. Really like that. And I also like how they add other attributes like Accurate Sword, increases your accuracy, and they can actually chain them. So I want to do the same thing in Fortaeverse and even expand on that. So I have these base item types, and they're kind of like templates. And so what I'm doing is I set properties on those, and then I can randomly generate the other random equipment with special magical properties and things based on those templates, and also calculate automatically how much it's worth. I'm trying to do the same thing with monsters and enemies, like trying to analyze and figure out how much they're worth and all that kind of thing. So that's what I'm working on. So I'm just going through some tedious code right now, and going through all these different item types and setting structure points, because armor and weapons have structure points and they're going to break over time, depending on what they're made out of too. Like it can be made out of something strong like hardened steel. Hey Leandro and John, welcome to the stream. Good to see you here. But yeah, so I'm just working on all that kind of stuff. So as I'm doing this tedious stuff here, I'll kind of show you in a bit some of the other properties. Let me actually go do that right now. So let me search for Creo, since that's an easy word. So I did borrow this idea from Might and Magic 4 Plus. I think 3 may have even had the same concept, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But as you know, there's different types of damages in my game. There's anything heat related, and here's a bunch of those types like hot, burning, flaming, searing, scorching, and lava. And I'm setting how much base damage, bonus damage those do to the weapon. Like if it just has the descriptor of hot, they'll do 2 extra damage, and it'll be heat damage or fire damage. And then if you have a burning weapon, it's going to be 5. So these vary all the way from 2 to 35 for heat. And then you have cold, you have electric, you have acid, you have a generic caustic, and then you have bases. So you have acids and bases. They both do damage. And the reason why I did that is because in reality, there's some things in real life that are resistant to acid but not bases from a pH perspective, so I'll be able to handle all that kind of thing. There's poison type damage, which actually doesn't damage your physical body, like the structure or the health points. It damages your circulatory system. So you can still die from that. So like you could actually, if you had a weapon, let's say this noxious weapon, and let's say it's a noxious Flamberge, because these combinations will go on any type of weapon. So this will do 12 damage to the circulatory system as poison damage. So as long as you don't have poison resistance, whoever you're attacking, you could actually kill them from a circulatory system damage over time, and they could still be really strong with their physical health on the outside. And they just fall over dead once their circulatory system went so low. Same with mental. You have mental health. So these weapons like mental, cerebral, madness, lunacy, and folly will do mental damage. And so you could be slowly causing the person to maybe go into a coma or go insane by those weapons hitting them. And then these are nervous system weapons, because you have nervous system health too. So you can actually end up causing someone to fall into a coma or be paralyzed if you get their nervous system down low enough. So I'm trying to add, all these different ways of fighting different types of things. And sometimes you'll have big advantages with a certain type of attack, and other times there'll be a disadvantage. Thanks, Leandro. Hey, Sandor, welcome to the stream. And then what do we got here? This is respiratory system damage. So these are things that affect your lung. If an enemy has lungs, because some won't, like undead, they don't breathe. So these would have no impact on them. But most creatures probably breathe. So these will do damage to the respiratory system and can kill them that way. Vacuum's the strongest. Basically sucks out the air out of their lungs. So that can do up to 25 on that. And then there's stamina lowering weapons. So every creature is going to have stamina, just like in the Wizardry series. So these will drain the stamina out of the enemy. And if that gets to 0, then they'll fall unconscious. And then down here, I'm still not 100% sure how I'm going to do this, but these are radiation oriented. So if you've ever played a game called Wasteland, it's an old PC game, they had some futuristic type weapons, like the ion beam and some other, what did they call it, Mason cannon. And I always like the concept of being able to use radiation too, because radiation can a lot of times go through certain materials that nothing else can. And so I have these here, and they'll do radiation damage. And most things are not going to be resistant to radiation. So you might be heat resistant, cold resistant, that, but radiation is going to be pretty tough to resist. So that's those combinations that's going to go on the weapons based on just finding magic treasure and things over time. And so now I'm going to go back to the tediousness and show you some of that. So there's hit areas in the game, of course, and you can have like mittens or gloves on your hands. You could have bracers on your lower arm. You could be wearing full plate armor that covers your whole body, so it would cover all of those areas, and that's all you're wearing is full plate. So you can kind of piece them together, or you can have, sets of pieces. Like a jacket would cover the upper body, the torso, the back, the arms. And so you can have all these combinations, and depending on what it's made out of, it'll impact its ability to absorb damage. So mail is a certain type of armor, and it typically means it's chain links. So it's almost always made out of a metal of some kind, because metals are, pliable, and you can link them together and chain them. So certain type of materials doesn't really make sense to make mail. On the other hand, like padded, if you had padded mittens, obviously padded implies it's some kind of cloth, whether it's filled with wool or leather and something inside the leather. So all these different combinations I'm trying to come up with. And then they have different resistance types. Like if you have something made out of wood, it's more resistant to electricity. But if you're wearing like iron or steel, then electricity is going to do a lot more damage. In fact, it'll probably be amplified. And so all of that's going to be taken into account. And I'm trying to take into account that for price. So when you go to buy some of this stuff, it's going to automatically calculate, so I don't have to, how much things are worth. So I don't have to manually go through and set prices on all this stuff. The game will use some intelligence to figure out, yeah, that gives you benefit quite large on this, a small benefit on this, and I'm going to have the price be automatically determined. So I know that's probably sounds pretty crazy and complicated, and it kind of is, but once I get that coded, then that's going to be great. It's just the game's going to produce all these combinations automatically, and I won't have to do any of that. So I've copied this code from another place just so that I can see all the item types I have so far. And I just finished the armor down there, so now I'm getting up to weapons. And these are projectiles, like arrows and bolts, that you shoot out of ranged weapons. Here's some stones. Okay. The reason why I'm doing this, I'm cutting all this out in this other section, is because all I really want here are the names, because I'm going to set up structure points and things like that on these. Like a big mallet's going to have a lot of structure points, so it'll take a long time to damage it, break it. But something like maybe a little dagger, wouldn't have as many. And it does depend on what it's made out of. If you find a copper dagger, it's not going to be very strong compared to a steel dagger. So that is another impact, is the material type will determine how much damage a weapon does, plus how much it does to the armor. Like if you hit an enemy that's wearing hardened steel plate with a copper dagger, your dagger is going to take a lot of structure point damage, and most likely you will not penetrate it. Okay. And I'm probably going to break away from reality a little bit on some of this stuff. Like, in some games you'll find like a diamond plate mail. And, I mean, that'd be pretty ridiculous to be able to find. So I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I may make it where you can find like a diamond knife or a diamond dagger, something that you still wouldn't probably find in real life, but at least it's a little more believable because it's a lot smaller. And of course, with magic, you could potentially forge things that normally you wouldn't be able to in real life. So I always struggle with breaking away from reality when I'm making games. But you have to make it more fun sometimes. And once you throw magic in the mix, then, all bets are off. You should be able to do anything you want. Having all kinds of pole arms. In the original AD&D gold box game, Pool of Radiance, that's one of the things I really liked about it. Was it had, Guisarms, Volgs, Lockbaraks. Well, it didn't have that one, but tridents, Fashard, all these different weapons. And then in the later gold box games, they got rid of them, and all they had was like a halberd. And I just love variety, so I'm gonna have all kinds of variety in this game. Cudgel, baton, rod, wand. Here's another weapon that's in the original Pool of Radiance. It's called a Joe, and it's a Oriental influence weapon. It's like it's not really a bow staff, but it's like you can think of it as a short bow staff. It's one-handed normally. This is one I've never seen in a game before. I researched, and it's called a beaked battle hammer, and there actually were some of these in real life. The one was called a Totika. I think that's how you pronounce it. But that thing actually looked very, very vicious. So I thought, man, that'll be cool to put in the game. It'll do piercing and crushing damage at the same time. Kind of falls into a hammer category. some weapons for me are hard to categorize because they actually do different types of damage. Like a semi-rigid whip, it's not really a whip. It's like a stick, or like you've heard of a switch, but it's a really flimsy stick that has a lot of give to it, so it has the effect of a whip. But it's made out of wood. It's not made out of leather. It's a special kind of wood. So I categorized it as a whip because it's not real. It's not a club. But yeah, some weapons are just don't have a good category. Yeah, hey Silicon King, welcome to the stream. Yeah, there will be wood armor and there will be wood weapons, and they're not going to be. Well, actually, wood armor, believe it or not, can be quite effective. A lot of like samurai armor had wood as the base. And if you put padding and stuff behind it, it can be very effective out of a hard wood. Now for weapons, I mean, yeah, clubs and blunt weapons, it's really good. Sometimes made out of a hard wood. It can be deadly, but like a sword, you will find them in the game, believe it or not, but they're going to be really crappy. Like the amount of damage they do and the density is so much lower compared to iron that unless you're hitting flesh, which, you know, it would hurt if you hit flesh, it's not going to penetrate through plate armor or something like that, most likely. But yeah, there's some hard woods that are extremely hard. Yeah, I do a lot of research when I'm trying to develop games and things because I like them to try to be as accurate as possible. And I actually found there's some ebony woods and mahogany that are actually harder than steel. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Their hardness factor, when they were tested, actually exceeded steel's. Now they're not pliable like steel is, so steel is much better for taking damage because a really hard object can crack and get physically shattered when it exceeds its structural integrity, and you can have that with hardwood sometimes. But yeah, I'm not going to get quite as goofy as Might Magic 4 did, like where it had like a leather halberd. I'm not going to let leather, you know, be a weapon type for something like a halberd. Now, leather whip, sure, but I am going to put a little bit of reality to it. Although it always makes me laugh, like when I find like a glass sword or, yeah, a leather halberd or something. I don't know why, I just find that so funny. I guess because of my imagination, I just picture this, you know, warrior or barbarian running up in battle with this head of a halberd formed out of leather. And then he'd hit somebody and it'd just be like a squeak toy. It'd be like, okay. Now wood, yeah, you could do some damage with wood. Not nearly as much as metal, but you could still do something with it. Here we got maces, Morning Star, and then I have like a heavy flanged mace and heavy Morning Star. So if you don't know the difference, so flanged maces have like sharp edges to them, but they're not spikes. Whereas the Morning Stars are spiked. And then, of course, flails. Flails are one of my favorite types of weapons. And those are, you know, just either a chain or a rope or something like that with some type of ball or object on the end. But, you know, like nunchucks, those I'm classifying as flails because it is kind of like a flail. It's a real short one, but nevertheless, it is a lashing type weapon. Same thing with like the Kusarigama, which I've never seen in a game. I've seen it in the Dungeons and Dragons Player's Guide, the Oriental version. I've never seen it in a computer game. So I definitely want to include that. That's a really cool weapon. And again, that's a combination. It's not just a flail. It's kind of a sickle at the same time. But you have to categorize some things. So Yeah, leather halberd with an edge. Hey, Gamerlon, welcome to the stream. How you doing? Bill hook. So now we're getting more into the sickle type weapons. Scythe, Kopesh, Falx. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I think it's Falx. Good, glad to hear you're fine. I'm glad your channel's still around too. And now we get to some picks. I classified the Becte Corbin as a pick because it could be a hammer too, but it's got a point on it on one side where it is definitely a pick. And so I threw it into that category. Then we get into axes, Barbarian's favorite weapon. I also threw the cleaver in as an axe because it's kind of a chopper, you know. And I haven't decided yet on a battle axe because a battle axe is kind of a generic name. Like a hand axe and a bearded axe. The bearded talks about the head and how it's shaped. You know, it has that concave shape to it where it kind of looks like a beard to lighten the axe. It also can be used to pull a shield down. So, you know, you can hit a shield and kind of pull it and get it out of the way. Whereas like a regular hand axe doesn't have that. It's more like a, you know, just a straight edge. So a battle axe, you know, it's kind of like a great axe, but I've seen in some games they'll have it as two-handed, and some games they have it as one-handed. So it's just such a generic term that I haven't really put it in there because I think these are more accurate for describing exactly what kind of axe it is. And then we're getting to knives and daggers. Main gauche, the Qatar, I'm not sure how to pronounce that either. Stiletto, dagger, knife. And then we start getting into swords. We've got piercing ones like the rapier, scimitar, estoc, saber. Then with some Asian ones like wakizashi, katana, falcon, Flamberge, great sword. So great sword's, you know, a big two-handed sword. Long sword and one-handed, just longer. Short sword, one-handed, shorter. Okay, and dagger. So this function that I'm in is called get potential items. And so this is my random generator I was telling you about. And what it's going to do is run through every item type, and each item type can have components in it. Like a sword has a handle and it has a blade, whereas like an axe will have a head and a base or a handle. And so they can be made out of different things. Like the head of an axe can be made out of stone, steel, you know, all kinds of things. But typically the handle is made of wood. And so this get potential items function here is going to run through all the combinations for every item type and put them together. So, you know, like for a sword, you may have an ivory blade. Like it may be made out of horn, like the horn of an animal, or it could be made out of hardwood. And so sometimes you'll get a ivory handled blade or sword, which then maybe has a bronze blade, or a bronze blade with a wooden handle. So it'll run through all these combinations. It's going to calculate the cost based on what it's made out of and benefits and the damage, how much it absorbs, all that junk. That's what this function's doing. It's getting all the possible combinations. And then I can tell this function what's the minimum cost and the max cost of a item I want to generate. So like I could say, let's say you go into a dangerous area in the game and you deserve a pretty good reward. I may set a treasure chest that has a min cost between 10,000 and 15,000. And so the game's going to give you an item within that range based on the cost. And those costs, like I said, are going to be determined by formulas I build in here. So you should be pretty happy with what you get unless it's something that you just can't use. But then if you wanted to and you had any divine favor points, you could use one of those to choose an item. I'm going to make that. It's kind of like a wish spell that every character starts with one divine favor except for humans. Humans get 2 because humans don't have as many benefits as the other races. So anyway, let's say you get a musical instrument, musical instrument, you don't have a bard, and you do not plan on changing a class to a bard. So you're like, I don't want that. So to use a divine favor, it'll give you a big list of things you could wish for, and you could pick, replace this item. And so then the game's going to give you a list of a whole bunch of item types within that same cost range. And you'll say, that's what I want. And, you'll probably get a list of like 200 because there's going to be just so many combinations. But divine favor is hard to come by, so, you may not want to waste it on that. You can get more, but it's very rare. But anyway, it always bugged me in games when you would get some item and you like busted your butt and it's like, oh, that's what I get, and you sacrificed all this. So I wanted to give an option for a player to be able to change that reality. Okay, so now what I'm doing is looking at an item type. For example, here's a dagger. So a dagger, its primary hit area is the blade. Obviously, you're not going to hit someone with a handle. That's just dumb. So I tell the game engine that the blade's what's going to be modified. So then it's going to flip through and say, okay, based on the cost range you gave me, could it be a diamond dagger? Could it be a steel dagger? Hardened steel? Is it going to be copper? And I have certain ones that I can make it out of stone, hard stone or soft stone. And it'll narrow in on all the different combinations based on that. So you could end up with something like a stone dagger, but it's extremely expensive because it has a magic benefit. Like maybe it's a cryo stone dagger. So the stone itself, wouldn't do as much damage, but the cryo aspect of it would do cold damage. So you're going to get a lot of weird combinations sometimes because the base material may not be worth much, but the effect is real big. Or the opposite. You may find like a gold dagger with blades made out of gold, and that would really not be good in a battle because it's going to bend really easily. But it's worth a lot because it's made out of gold. So then you could sell it, So I don't want that. That's worthless. So I'm going to sell it and get a ton of money out of it. So I'm putting all that into here. So the base dagger, I'm saying the handle is going to be 40 structure points. And you can think of a structure point as a hit point. So if that dagger takes a direct hit to the handle, 40 damage worth will crack that handle. It's going to break it. And then that dagger will be useless. And in fact, there's one class I have that allows you to target weapons. I'm trying to remember I think it's the Swashbuckler. The Swashbuckler has a disarm opponent skill with, if they have a quick weapon like a rapier or an e-stock or something. So they could potentially try to aim for a weapon and knock it out of the hand, and it could be like a really good weapon, like the blade might be strong, but you crack the handle and damage it, now it's useless. So that's why I have different structure points on the different components. So the blade, most objects here I'm assuming are made out of steel, just regular steel. So it's going to have 1,300 structure points. Now the way this will work is when the game engine determines the material that the blade's made out of, it's going to modify the structure points based on the hardness value of that material. And I've researched this. I looked up hardness scores for all these materials, and so it'll multiply or divide the structure points based on that. Let me see if I can show you. Let's do insert composition. So for example, steel has a hardness of 130, and that's on a hardness scale, and I looked this up, like I said, this is real research, whereas hardened steel is 201. So if you find a hardened steel dagger, 201 compared to 130, what is that, like maybe 60%, 50%? Let's see. It's about 50% more structure points. Whereas if you look at aluminum, its hardness is only 23. So it would take that 1300 if you find an aluminum dagger, and it's gonna, probably divide it by what, about 6? Yeah, about 6.5. So instead of 1300, you're gonna be 200. Yeah, you'll be at about 200 structure points. So, Silicon Kane says, any plans on unbreakable weapons? Yeah, actually, that's a good question. You will be able to cast spells. There's certain spells that can improve the hardness, and then there's going to be a spell called permanency that a certain caster will be able to cast. So if you cast those in combination, you can make it super hard and then permanent. Or the other thing is the craftsman profession. They have a weaponsmith, an armorsmith, and those types of things, skills. They're actually going to be able to reinforce things and make them stronger and stronger and stronger. So as your skill gets higher for the craftsman, you'll be able to make a weapon, I wouldn't say quite unbreakable, but it'll get to the point where you really won't have to worry about it. Plus, the craftsman will repair it in the background over time. Like, you won't have to do it. That's for people that don't want to have to worry about this kind of stuff. You could just have a craftsman in your party, or you could leave a craftsman back, let's say in town, and bring your party back and drop the weapon off with them, and then go off an adventure, and then come back later and it'll be repaired or reinforced or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of that going on. Because remember, this game isn't just about fighting. It's about however you want to play it. You don't have to fight ever if you don't want to. You can make professions where you just do constructive things. You're an engineer, or you're a craftsman, or a miner, and you just work on those skills and find things. And you could go on adventures. You could have diplomats. So you try to avoid fights. So there'll be lots of things to do in the game, and that's just one aspect, is buffing up these weapons and repairing them and reinforcing them and all that kind of fun stuff. I want this to be more like tabletop role-playing, where you can just play it and do whatever you want. You don't have to fight if you don't want to. Okay, so the dagger, its weight for the handle is going to be 0.2, and I'm just doing this in pounds. I know. It's an American thing, but United States, but we're so stuck on the British engineering units. That's what I'm using. So 0.2 pounds, and then the blade weight is 0.6. So the total weight for the dagger is 0.8. Again, that's assuming it's made out of steel, and the different materials will impact the weight, and weight will impact your stamina and how likely you are to hit with the weapon, and the initiative. So, heavier weapon, you're not going to be able to attack as fast. So all those things come into favor. Hey, some person, welcome to the stream. Pounds of gold, that's right. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Silicon Kane. yeah, I just over time I just keep adding more and more, and that's what makes it fun for me. This is really fun working on this stuff, and I can't wait for it to get done where you guys can play it and share it with you. It's just going to be awesome. It's like it'll be an ongoing thing for so long. Like even when the game's released, I'll be working on it for years, just adding stuff. And then who knows? I mean, maybe someday some bigwig out there will spot it and be like, "Man, that game looks just so fun. Why don't we make graphics and just make animation out of it?" And then I can actually have someone fund all that. But I'm not gonna plan on that. I'm not getting my hopes up. But it is gonna be completed, and it'll be just a really intense game. It'll have a lot of sound. There's gonna have plenty of sound and voices and stuff, but the graphics are my biggest missing link. Well, thank you. If I'm interested in applying science, yeah. Remember that most structural metals are in fact alloys. Yeah, you're right. That's true, Leandro. And that's where I have to break out of reality at some point, because I mean, hardened steel is an alloy, and so is just regular steel and wrought iron. All those are alloys. You're right. They're not pure iron. And so I do have a mix. Like diamond, that's pure, but that's a compound. That's not an element. Whereas like silver's an element. So I am going to have combinations. Sometimes it'll be elements. Sometimes it'll be alloys. But yeah, that's a good point. It'll be a good mix. All right, so we got the dagger. So now we're going to do short sword. Now you can see why I put all this code here, because now I can just start copying and pasting and comparing. So if a dagger had 40 structure points on the handle, short sword is going to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to give it 60. And then the blade's probably twice as much, so we're going to give that 2600. And then so essentially the weight's going to double, maybe even a little bit more, and then the handle weight we're going to bump up to that. And so I just try to proportionally adjust things like this. Now we're to the long sword, which is going to be twice short sword. Great sword, getting even bigger yet. Yeah, the one damage type that I was always conflicted with, which hardly any other game has, is called rending. And it's basically like kind of a chainsaw effect. And the Flamberge, the reason why I'm bringing that up, the Flamberge is a little bit of a rending, but not really. It's kind of curved, but it's not enough to say it actually does rending damage. And so I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have weapons that can do both. It can do multiple damage types, like a Morning Star, for example, or a spiked flail. If you have a spiked flail and you swing that at somebody, when that hits them, especially if it's not like a direct hit straight on, when that hits, that would do crushing damage, it would do piercing damage from the spikes, but it would also do cutting damage, because as that hit, you'd have like a lot of tearing going on, which is close to rending. Rending's like a tearing type damage. So you don't really need rending damage if you can make the weapons do them all. So that's what I do, is I have, maybe it'll do 20 crush damage, 12 pierce damage, and 8 cut damage. And so it does all those at once. And so if something's resistant to cutting damage, like a skeleton, let's say you're fighting a skeleton, then it takes half damage from cutting, but it'll do the crush part would do full damage. And then the pierce, I think, like in Dungeons and Dragons, they take a lot less damage from pierce. They may even take 0. Can't remember that for sure, but But yeah, that I think will work out great. Are demons going to be in the game? Yes, they will be. Yeah. They'll be... There's going to be so many monster types, it's going to be ridiculous. And the reason why I can do that is because I don't have to rely on graphics. You know, like most games, you want a demon, you got to make demon graphics. So since I don't have the graphics for it, I'm going to try to have some kind of generic graphics, hopefully, that'll work for humanoids, like maybe a shady looking humanoid that I can have in the shadows to kind of get by without having the graphics. So I'm going to try to do that whenever possible. But then I don't have to worry about that. So yeah, there's going to be demons, devils, undead, all kinds of undead. Just normal creatures. There'll be giant things like giant frogs, giant toads. There'll be just normal animals, bears, all kinds of humanoids, all kinds of spellcasters, of course. You see how many different caster types I have. It's kind of ridiculous, but again, that makes it really fun because they all specialize in something. Okay, let's see here. So, great sword is just huge. Trying to think. It probably would be about double the mass of a longsword. So I'm going to make this, I'm just going to make it an even 10,000 structure points on that blade. No handle. I'm going to bump it up to 1. And the weight, just going to make 6. Believe it or not, like I've done a lot of research on this. There's a guy on YouTube named Lindy Beige. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he does all kinds of research on medieval weapons, and he's tested them and does all kinds of stuff. And he said, you know, these great swords and these giant swords that we historically hear about aren't nearly as heavy as they make it sound like in a lot of games and stuff. Now, pole arms, that's a different story. Axes and hammers, that's a different story. But for swords, they're still light. The great sword, that's like 6 pounds, even though it's two-handed, because you use it to slice. You know, it's not like a chopping weapon like an axe is. So you don't want it to be real heavy. You know, you thrust with it or you'll slash with it. And so the great sword, 6 pounds, you know, but you swing that a lot, that would weigh you down. Oh yeah, there'll be liches, there'll be mind flayers, definitely. There'll be all kinds of psychic type attackers. Because you have mental health in this game, as I mentioned. So there'll be all kinds of ways where, you know, you could have the best armor in the world. You could be a well-armored knight, and you go up against the mind flayer, your armor's useless. You know, it's going to be blasting you with mental damage, and if you don't have resistance to mental damage or some spell to protect you, you'll just fall into a coma or go insane and, you know, be screwed. Oh, so you've heard of Lindy Beige Silicon King? That's cool. Britain's #1 fan. Cool. Yeah, he's really entertaining. I love his channel. He's got such a dry sense of humor, that kind of typical British dry sense of humor that I love. But yeah, he's very knowledgeable. Okay, Flamberge. So this I researched, and it's not super wavy like you see in some games. It's very slight wave. And they think it was to help you to like deflect blows from a sword or to catch weapons, like spears and things, and actually be able to maybe even cut through them as like someone's coming down with polearm or as a long pike or something. So that's what it was for. It wasn't necessarily to like cut someone with that serrated blade. But again, this is where I maybe get away from the truth a little bit just to make it more fun. So I'm just going to leave it the same as a greatsword. Maybe I'll drop it a little bit because they are thinner. I'm going to leave they do have big handles though. So I'm going to leave the handle the same but drop the structure points just a little bit. So we'll drop the weight to 5. Gamerlon says blinking bats like in Gateway to Apshai. I haven't played Gateway to Apshai, so I didn't know about that, but that's interesting. So is that the magic blink spell where they phase out and then phase back in, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons? Because yeah, there definitely is going to be a blink. I have the ethereal dimension in my game and the physical dimension, and there's ghosts, and ghosts are in the ethereal world, and some other type of undead maybe, and spirits and things like that. And so essentially when you blink, you're going to be out of this dimension and you'll be in the ethereal world. And the interesting thing about the ethereal world is spell casting may still work. It depends on the type of spell, but you may be able to cast some spells that still impact the physical world, even though you're not in the physical dimension. And then you have no body, so you'll have like an appearance potentially, like a ghost. So someone will swing a weapon at you, it's going to go right through you. So it's not going to be like wizardry where you can hit ghosts with a sword. I always thought that was silly. You cannot hit spirits with a non-magical weapon. So I will have that. So Gamerlon says they're monsters. So yeah, I would definitely have bats and probably all kinds of varieties like vampires. I'm not sure if I'll have a blinking one or not, but it's kind of a cool idea. Some person said he did a painting of a cloaker and another with a demi-lich longo. That's cool. So you like to paint for a hobby, or is that what you do for a living? Okay, falcon. It's gonna be pretty much like a longsword. In fact, I'm gonna give it a little more structure points. They're a pretty chunky weapon. Longsword weighs 2.8. We're gonna make this 3.5. Katana. Now katanas are really light. So we're gonna take the longsword and we're gonna lighten it up. But they're made out of really strong steel in general. We're gonna bump it to 6,000. We're gonna lighten it here. You haven't paid in a long time. Oh, I hope you get back to it if you enjoy it. Oh, thanks, Silicon Kane. Yeah. So AD&D 2nd edition from the Monster Manual, he said edged or piercing weapons do half damage on skeletons. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially the piercing. I mean, edged weapons I think would still do a little more than that, in my opinion. Okay, Wakizashi is just a little smaller than a katana, so we're going to go back and look at the short sword. 2,600, so we'll give it 3,500. Then the weight, 0.3, 1.4, 1.2. No, I have never played Dungeon Master. And you know, I used to have a thing called the Dungeon Master Assistant. I used that when I used to do Dungeons and Dragons in high school. And when people used to ask me, do you have Dungeon Master? I'm like, yeah, because that's what I thought they were talking about. And then later on I find out, no, it's an actual game that they're talking about. And that, yeah, I've never played it. Is that the first person perspective game? Sabre. Alright, so Sabre. Yeah, I don't think it would have as many as a longsword. I'm gonna give it 4,500. E-stocks are really light. They're very small. So we're going to do $1.5 for the weight. But you have to have a lot of structure points because they're pointed and much more concentrated. So I'm going to leave the structure points at that. They're just lighter. It's an old school dungeon crawler. Leandro says Dungeon Master The Legend of Skull Keep is awesome. Okay, so it's like Eye of the Beholder, Lands of Lore. Newer is Legend of Grimrock. I've played Eye of the Beholder. I used to play 1 and 2 of that. Alright, Scimitar we're going to make similar to the Falcon. I'm just going to leave it the same for now. I can tweak that later because it's probably pretty darn close. And then the rapier is going to be like the E-stock. Very similar. Alright, and then we're getting back to the knives. So we're going to copy the dagger. A knife is essentially a dagger. It's just not sometimes double-edged and sometimes doesn't have a hand protector on it. So we're going to lighten that handle weight to 0.15 instead of 0.2. And then the blade we're dropping, make it 1,000. 900. And then the weight 0.4. Okay, then we have a stiletto, which is going to be more than the dagger. Leandro says, perhaps I should load those stats in XML file. Never forget the Java XML. That's funny. This is going to be stiletto. Yeah, this stuff will be loaded in a database, not XML. What'll happen is this code runs and generates records and inserts them into a database, and then I read them out of the database. Okay. So this definitely a bigger handle, and we'll bump up the blade to 1800. Then a main gauche. Those are used a lot for parrying. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I use a lot of XML still, but only for certain things. You don't want to use it when you have a massive amount of data. Leandro said he started developing in Java in those times when everything was done with XML. What type of database will you use? Right now, I'm using a Java-based one called HSQLDB, but that's not going to be robust enough for a MMORPG. So I'll probably use SQL Server, but it depends on what I end up putting this on. It's Java, so I can run it on a Linux server. Right now I have a Windows-based server, so SQL Server makes it easy, and it's easy to maintain. But yeah, I could always move it to a Linux with even something simple like MySQL, or I could put DB2 or Oracle. That's the beauty of Java. Very easily just flip it over to whatever we need. But the current plan is just SQL Server. Alright, I'm going to leave that same. And then Qatar. I'll have to even look up what that is because I'm not 100% sure. I know I saved it, what that type of knife or dagger is. Since I can't remember off the top of my head, I'll just leave it with those stats. Okay, now we're getting to axes. So the first one is a hand axe. So I think I'm going to grab this one. Hand axe is about the smallest axe I have. Well, besides the cleaver. So we're going to... They have much better handles, obviously. I would say probably 160 on that instead of 80. Actually, let's go to 200. They're long handles. And then the blade doesn't use blade. It has a head. And change that to head. And the head weight. Okay. So we're going to make this the head is small, but it's dense and it's thick. Whereas like a blade, you know, on a sword's real long, so it'd have a lot of structure points from that, plus it's usually hardened better. I think I'm going to make this 5,000 for the hand axe. We need to add a head weight here. Okay. Alright, so that's the first axe. Let's see. Yeah, HSQL is quite good. That's what I'm using now. But it does run into some pretty big performance problems once you start hitting a lot of data. And right now I'm not doing that. Well, actually I did push its limits with a bunch of messages I was inserting into it. But eventually, with it being a massive multiplayer online RPG, you know, it needs to be just gigantic, build a scale super large. Now, if I had a server that had like a terabyte of RAM, then HSQLDB would be fine because it could basically load almost all of it into RAM. But it starts suffering a lot when it hits the disk a lot. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the Qatar is an Indian dagger. I think it's got a weird shape to it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the push dagger. That's right. Yeah, and that's what made that thing so cool. It did like a lot of piercing damage because you could get a lot of strength behind it. Oh, thanks. Looked it up on Wikipedia. Gamerlon says, "Oh no, not Wikipedia." Yeah, I do not only use Wikipedia for my research, just for the record, but it does have some good information. A lot of times it'll lead you somewhere else too. So I do use it for sure. I just don't rely on it 100%. Speaking of Wikipedia, have you guys ever corrected anything on Wikipedia? Like found something wrong and you know for sure it's wrong and you edited a page? Cleaver's much smaller. Cleaver essentially is a handle of like a dagger. I'm going to give it a little bit bigger than a dagger. But then, just, you know, that little bitty edge there. So let's look at a dagger. So stiletto's 1800. We'll give it 2000. Handle weight. Oh, I need to change. Did I change this handle weight already? No, I didn't. So the handle weight on the hand axe needs to go up a little bit. And the head weight, definitely not that. It's going to be much lower. Let's see. We'll make it 2. Even that may be a little. Yeah, that's probably about right. So the cleaver is going to be much lighter. I'm going to do 0.5, 4, and then the head weight's going to be probably 1. Okay, bearded axe. I always found this an interesting one. So it's lighter than the hand axe, but gosh, I don't know if it would have less structure points. I guess it would because it has less metal. So we'll drop it a little bit. Handle's going to be the same. The weight will drop drastically though. And then we get the big axe. I'll grab the hand axe and then do the grate. This is a heavy axe. Alright, so handle, we're going to give 350. That's a big handle. And then let's say, this is a double-sided, basically like a butterfly axe. Let me look at the great sword. I did 10,000. I'm going to do 12,000 on this. Handle weight, we're going to say it probably weigh about 2.5 or 3. Let's do 3. It's got to be pretty strong to handle the heavy weight on the end. And we're going to do, I think 12 pounds for the head. That's probably about right. So obviously that'll do a lot more damage. Silicon Kane said yes, he edited a page and it was removed in 30 seconds. You were so proud of your edit, all the time you put into it. Man, that sucks. Yeah, I don't understand how they monitor that. Because, like, how do they pick and choose who the experts are? Is it based on how long they've been a member? And how many things they've approved for a given section? I don't know. I edited one page one time. I edited Phantasm. There's a movie called Phantasm. It's a horror movie. And there's a car in that. And they said it was a Barracuda. But it's not. It was a Hemicuda. And so I changed that. And I think it stuck. I think they kept it. I don't know if it's just because nobody had monitors an obscure movie like that or what. But it was one of my favorite horror movies. So I knew so much about it. I'm like, that's not a Barracuda. It's a Hemicuda. It's a Plymouth Hemicuda. Some person says it's like being punted down for reporting bugs. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so now we're to a pick. And actually, the pick itself isn't really a weapon. I'm trying to think, or is it? No, it's a base for the weapon types. It's the category. So we'll start with the hand pick. It's kind of like a one-handed small pick there. So those have a lot of structure points, obviously, because those are used on rocks and all kinds of things. Strong handle, it's got to be, to withstand all that jarring. And it does have a head instead of a blade. I'm going to say, 8,000 on that, even though it's small. Pretty lightweight handle. I'd say the head would probably weigh 3.5. We'll do 3.5. Okay, and then we'll do pickaxe, which of course is a two-handed that miners would use. Very, very, very hefty. We're going to give that 15,000. And let's take a look at the great axe. So, handle weight of 3, head weight. I'm going to say 15. So that weighs 18. That's a heavy weapon. Okay, and then we got the Becte Corbin. Which again could be either a hammer or kind of like a pick. Now some games have a two-handed and some have a one-handed. Like some act like it's a pole arm, but for the research I did, it's not really a pole arm. You can use two hands on it though, but it's more like a hammer that's, you know, about that long or so. So I'd say we're gonna make it similar to the hand pick, but just kind of beef it up a little bit. We're gonna make it 12,000 there. We'll leave the handle the same. Well, no, let's bump that a little bit too. And then the head weight, a little bit more. So it weighs about 6. Oh, I went offline? Man, that sucks. Yeah, I've had that happen to me before. Well, I'm glad that it's back. Usually OBS Studio will notify me when it goes offline, but it didn't there. So I don't know if it's YouTube or what. I've had that sometimes. It's frustrating. Okay, now we're on to the sickles. So what's all your guys' favorite weapons? If you could pick a favorite melee weapon to use in a game, what would you pick? No, sickle. They have a blade, okay. Ah, Silicon Kane says a spiked club. That's cool. And there will be spiked clubs in here, so you'll get your favorite weapon. Yeah, Spike Club always reminds me of the movie Escape from New York. Have you guys seen that one? It's a Kurt Russell sci-fi movie. John Carpenter wrote it. This is Sickle's one-handed in my game, so let's see. Gonna make it about the same size as that. Do 5,000. Could weigh 3. Leandro says melee weapon, daggers for assassins, night blades. Gamer Lon says a lion sword. Some person said he's not sure, but an ice sword? Cool. Those are all cool. Silicon Kane, John Carpenter's music is awesome. It is, isn't it? Man, he's... Usually when I hear music, I can tell right away if that was John Carpenter. Like in Big Trouble in Little China, he did music for that. And he's just awesome. Okay, I'm gonna leave this the same. Kopesh, that's kind of like a, that's more like a falcon. I'm gonna snag these. Yeah, it does really set the tone in many cases, you're right. And it's so energetic. His music's just like, he makes the perfect battle music if you're gonna go into a battle. Whoops. Scythe, so this is gonna be a two-handed sickle, essentially. It's like the Grim Reaper weapon. So we're gonna double this. The blade itself, I mean, it will be bigger, but I don't think it's gonna be twice as big. Maybe it is. Yeah, we'll just double it. Yeah, very cyberpunky and very 80s, you're right. We're going to make the comma pretty much like a sickle. I'll just copy it. And then a bill hook, okay. That's kind of a strange weapon. We'll make it more like the scythe. Clubs. We're to the clubs. We're getting ready for a spiked one. Alright. Club. First one is a studded club. Well, actually, regular club. So, clubs just have a base, I believe. Yep, just a base, because they don't really have a handle. Most clubs don't. Okay, so we'll start with a regular club, and we're assuming this is made out of hardwood instead of steel. So the base structure points, I think I'm going to make it I'm going to make it 500. Yeah. Okay. All right, next we have studded club. So the studs on it are going to add some structure points. Bump it to 700. Oh, and the weight on a club? I'm going to make it 3.5. You don't want it to be too heavy. This is a one-handed club, because you wouldn't be able to, I mean, it just wouldn't be feasible. So the studded club's going to weigh a little more. Do 4.5. Batons, electronic truchons. I do have a slapjack. I don't know if you know what that is. I do have that type. And here's a sap. So, saps are kind of small. We're going to make it 350. Lightweight. Yeah, that should work. And then Tetsubo. Does anybody know what that is? Without cheating. I remember that from Dungeons & Dragons Oriental. Okay, this we're gonna make 1200. Base weight of probably about 7. I really don't know that for sure. That's what I'm gonna make it. Okay, spiked club. We're just gonna steal club. That's one of those weapons that'll do 2 types of damage. It'll do some piercing and crushing. Structure points really won't go up too much. I mean, the spikes don't really help that much with that, but we'll jump by 50. Base weight really won't go up much at all. We'll just go from 3.5 to 3.7. And then this I got from Wizardry 8. And evidently it is a real weapon. I did research on it. Shalalag? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It's a kind of lightweight stick. So we'll do 450. Base weight, very light. 1.5. Okay, we're done with those. Next we get on to maces. So maces category. The first real mace is a flanged mace. Yeah, you're close. Tetsu. And he says bow means staff. Yep. It's basically like a club. It's a two-handed club that kind of looks like a staff. It's a little thicker. But it has studs on the end. So it's basically a two-handed stud club. But very even. It's not like a club that, is kind of gnarled or anything. It's kind of like a thick staff. Alright, let's see here. Maces are very, very hefty. Getting in the category of hammers, basically. So what I'm going to do is start with a hand axe, but we'll bump it up. Because they do have heads. Maces have heads and handles. Handle, bump up to 300, and then the head we're going to say... Man, that'd be hard to destroy a mace head. This is a one-handed mace. I'm going to say 9,000. And then weight. That's probably about right. And then the head weight. That's probably about right too. Bump it up a tiny bit. Silken Cane says nothing better than a mace to the face. Yeah. Wizardry 8, the guards at the first town, that's what they use, those stun maces. And then we got Morning Star, which is a spiked mace. The Morning Star sounds cooler. So structure points probably be a little bit better just because it's round with spikes. It'd be that round part would make it harder to be able to totally destroy that. We'll just bump it to 10,000 for the one-handed. Okay, weight can be about the same. And then we got heavy, so these are the two-handed ones. So I'm just going to copy both of these. Alright, so handle, gonna double. We're just gonna double it all. That'll make it easy. Alright. Then we get to flails. Some person said Braveheart showed the brutality of those medieval weapons. Yeah. It started becoming popular when heavy armor was being worn. You know, the plate mail. Because swords were pretty much useless against plate mail. And then they started using the pole arms and the maces and the battle hammers and all that kind of stuff. Alright, ball and chain. So what we're going to do is take the flanged mace. Now, I know this has a chain. It also has a base and a head. So we need to add base structure points. And actually, yeah, we'll call this chain. So the base is essentially the handle. So it's still not going to be much. We'll do 300 there. The chain, I'd say to effectively damage it where it's not useful. You know, you only have to break one link. So we're assuming steel. My gut just keeps telling me 400. So I'm going to go with that. I'll reevaluate it later, but alright. So the chain on a ball and chain, this is, you know, one-handed. Gosh, I'm guessing. I really don't know for sure, but I'm going to take a guess. Chains can be pretty heavy. I'm going to guess 6. Of course, it depends on how long the chain is, of course, but all right, and then the base. Let me double check that again. Did it have base or handle? Base, okay. It's really a handle. Doesn't really matter. I can change that later. But we'll just act like the base is the handle, and we're going to do 0.8. And then the head weight. Be about the same as the Morning Star, but in between the heavy and the light, so we're going to do 3. So the total weight of this thing would be about 10 if you add it all up. Gamerlon says you can use the Excalibur if you can pull it out of the stone. That's right. Excalibur, one of my favorite story weapons. Then we got a spiked ball and chain. This stuff won't change much, it's just the damage will go up. It'll do more piercing. Base. That's not going to change at all. Chain won't change at all. The head. Just bump it a tiny bit. Okay. Then we have a flanged flail. I think I'll use this. Just going to leave that for now. Spiked flail, we'll use this one. Tweak that one later too. And then heavy flanged and heavy spiked. And once again, we'll just double everything. The chain, yeah, well, I don't know. I'll still double it. I'm just assuming the chain's thicker because it's heavier. Okay. Really heavy. This is two-handed flail, obviously. All right. Now we got nunchucks. Very lightweight. And it's going to have more, it can have a chain in the middle, but sometimes they'll have rope. It's one possibility. Okay, so this is going to be a lot lower. I think I will assume it's made out of metal, but you can have a wood one too. Let's see. We're going to drop this back to 5,000. You know what? I don't think it has a head. Let me look here. I think it's just a base. No, I have it with head, chain, and base, which isn't really accurate. Let me take out head. It's just going to be chain and base. This needs to be So we'll leave the base at 4,500, chain at 400. Very light. The tiny chain in between them is like almost insignificant. We'll put 0.1, and then the base, say 1. And I need to fix this too. So this should be base. Always copy paste the errors. So we're going to have there we are. We're going to have base, chain, and head. Base. Okay. All right. Then we're to the slapjack. That's a very strange weapon. For now, I'm just going to mimic the nunchuck. I'll tweak that later. And then the kusarigama. Whoops. Alright, we'll just leave the Kusari like the ball and chain, which... This is a very weird weapon. It's got like a sickle shape, like a comma shape. And then it also has a chain on the end where you can have a ball and chain on the other end. So it's a very strange weapon. A couple uses out of it. Alright. Now we're getting to whips. So we have a regular whip. Let me double check on what I have for that. Handle, base, and head. Okay. So this we're assuming is made out of leather, and the head is what takes the modifier. Double checking these. Yep, got those right. Okay. So the base structure points on a whip made out of leather. Oh boy. So this is the length of the whip basically. Or is it? Let me look at this. Head, base, and handle. Okay. Handle will be easy. That's the small part. We'll say on a whip, 200. Then the head's just the tip at the end, which depends on what it's made of. A normal whip is leather, and so unless you're hitting something that is sharp, it'll go on forever. You know, you can keep whipping a blunt surface and that leather is going to be pretty darn robust. So let's say 5,000 on that. And then the whip itself, if you cut at the whip with a sword or something, I mean, you could probably cut through that fairly easy. But it's pretty long too. I just don't know. If I said a chain was 400, then leather whip's got to be less than that. I'll do 250. And that would be assuming you're just cutting it like in half. Okay, the base weight. Let's do the handle first. Handle. So 0.8. Head was like weighs nothing. That's just the end. The reason why I have a head on is because like barbed whips, you know, they're gonna have barbs on the end and stuff. We're just gonna put 0.1. May not even be that. And then the leather whip itself, they're pretty darn light. I used to have one. When I was a kid, my dad got me one. I feel like it only weighed like 1 pound. So I'll just go with that. Alright, then we're to the cat o' nine tails. Which can tear things up pretty good. The weight's really not going to change that much here. We're going to bump the head weight up a little bit. Structure points on that. Rest we're going to leave. Okay, barbed whip. Pretty much the same. And then semi-rigid whip. That one's different. That's that stick I was telling you about. They're like made out of wood. Alright, we'll do handle, we'll bump that up. It's still going to be super light, but the base structure points I think would go up. We make it 500. And then the head, that's just going to be like the end, I guess. That's going to be kind of flimsy. And I don't think it would recover as well as a whip would when you hit something with it. If you hit something hard, I think you could crack it. So we're going to make this 1,000. Okay. Should be good. Hey, Tawheed. Welcome to stream. Dude from the island of Java. He arrived. Really? That's funny. The real island of Java? Alright, hammer. I think that's my generic category. I don't think I have a weapon called hammer. It's going to be one of these 4. Now let me find an axe, because they're going to have heads like axes. Only they're blunt. Okay. So Maul's a big 2-handed hammer. So let me do the warhammer first. Alright. It's going to actually be more comparable probably to a mace, but not quite as robust. We'll do head of 7500. Handle 250. Good. Maul. Just double it. Okay. Mallet, that's a small hammer. Blunt. Okay. And then that beaked battle hammer, you guys should look that up if you haven't. That's a really interesting weapon. The Totokia. No, Totokia. Alright, let's see. It's going to be pretty close to the battle hammer, or the warhammer. We'll just bump that up a little bit. Handle's a lot thicker. Yep, it should be good. So what we got left? Quarterstaffs, or staves, sticks, then pole arms. There's a lot of those. And then some exclusive throwing ones like javelins, shurikens, and darts. And then start getting into projectiles and things you can throw like rocks, rungu. And then we get into bows, crossbows, slings, and then arrows and bolts. And then it's down to the armor. So I think that's probably enough for tonight, guys. I enjoyed the conversations. That was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. But I hope anybody that celebrates Christmas, I hope you have a great Christmas. If you celebrate any other kind of holidays during this time, I hope you really enjoy that as well. So I'll be doing another live stream fairly soon after the holidays of Fantasy 3 and Might and Magic 4 again. So I think next due is Fantasy 3. So I'll try to post on the community page of my YouTube channel the next time I'm on a stream. Give a little bit of notice, but sometimes I can't do that. So anyways, a lot of fun, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.